At what point are the people in America considered American? So your question is essentially, at what point are they considered native to a region or indigenous? This is actually a great question because studies have shown many of the native tribes migrated here, but they are still considered indigenous. I feel your question will go over a lot of people's heads and will be criminally underrated. So start off by saying that there is no such thing as Scottish DNA or Irish DNA. What those tests do is show you where you have shared DNA strains from, as some markers are more common in certain regions or countries. It doesn't necessarily mean that these markers don't exist anywhere else, it's just them being more common. And most countries, especially European countries, don't consider ethnicity to be a thing in the way Americans do. So if we look at it from that point of view, we're looking at when we want a US-American DNA marker, then we need something that is going to evolve that doesn't happen in other parts of the world, or for markers that are mixing in ways we don't see elsewhere. And that is already happening. You can see it in your own results that are a mixture that wouldn't be seen commonly in Europe or even other parts of the Americas. The only thing lacking is the companies saying 23 USA because that's not the product they are selling. The answer to your question is that it's arbitrary. We have to decide to draw a line somewhere because such lines don't exist naturally. And my DNA test still says Irish and Scottish. Those DNA companies are very misleading. And this post is a great example of the damage they cause. They make people believe that there's such a thing as Irish or Scottish DNA. There isn't. I don't think there will ever be any new type of regional DNA, just because since the age of exploration regional DNAs have been intertwining, and given enough time all of Earth will have a little bit of everyone. The only way to really have American DNA is to be a Native American. Your DNA never becomes American, you're mixing up some concepts. American is a nationality, not a race or ethnicity. Genetics has very little to do with nationality. A nation is generally defined by group created by common memory and experience, and continued consent to belong to said nation. I think now and also never. America is a melting pot. I've also wondered this. My family has been in this country since the 600s. I haven't taken a DNA test, but I'd be interested in what it said. My friends who do them say it's 60 Western European, 32 Scandinavian, etc., but their families immigrated in the 19th and 20th centuries. I've read that unless you're indigenous, a DNA test will probably never say you're American, given that we're a melting pot and have so many ethnicities in this country. They determine area based on markers that are more common in a particular region than anywhere else. So there needs to be enough time that the group is not mixing with other groups so that unique patterns of markers form. At the moment, you can get DNA from an Australian person and an American person, assuming both are from the ethnic majorities that immigrated 200-odd years ago, and they wouldn't be distinct because not enough generations passed in their respective countries to say who was American and who was Australian. They would both probably show varied European lineage, again assuming we have people from the majorities. The best you could get is if there was any of the respective indigenous cultures in either of their family history, but then you're just back to square one. So it will probably never happen, because world travel is so easy that no country is as isolated as they used to be. The world is only going to get more homogeneous. I argued with a kayak guide in Hawaii that kept pointing out native birds and plants and invasive birds and plants. The only difference was that the invasive plants showed up via bird droppings and winds after humans showed up. The native plants were there before by the same mechanisms. Second generation and you are native. We are all the children of migrants. If you have an American parent at birth. Otherwise, when you take the oath of citizenship. To the rest of the world, you are an American native. I think a big part of American identity and expression is never admitting that one is truly an American native. We all need to hold on to parts of our distant heritage that would count for a little elsewhere. To me, the line is being born and raised primarily in the US. Some would argue the US passport is the line, which is fair as well. When they've diverged substantially from their parent populations and are more related to one another than to those parent populations. In other words, it's the point where you look at someone's DNA and say that's typical American DNA, which is more similar to other American DNA than DNA in current Europeans, Asians, or Africans. I have no idea when that happens chronologically. It will depend on breeding patterns. I suspect is that this will never happen, as people in developed countries are currently too mobile to stratify genetically by country. It's more likely that people will stratify genetically by income band. If I had to guess, in the future, there's likely to be a typical global elite DNA, and then a variety of regional DNAs that separate by income band. It will probably happen in whichever future generation the DNA of people in America who were living in America for generations start to look more similar to each other. compared to the DNA of people of other countries. Well, DNA isn't clear-cut, and those sites like 23andMe are misleading. You can't tell ethnicity from DNA. They use data and science to make an estimation of your ethnic background. American isn't an ethnicity, it's a nationality which has nothing to do with DNA. Nobody is 100 anything in America, as it has been a melting pot for different cultures. Even though I was born and raised here, and my family has been here for many generations, obviously my ancestry goes back to Europe, etc. This isn't really how DNA works, and the answer to your question is probably never. The very day you become a citizen, by whatever means born here, nationalized, married American citizen, you are an American. We are of European, African, Chinese, Japanese, etc. decent, all Americans. I guess I would be when another peoples displaces us and puts us on a reservation. Then we would be the natives.